All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Collier, and I am the Director of Freedom to Invest at Ceres. Freedom to Invest is at the forefront, along with our allies and partners, many of which are in this room, of pushing back on anti-ESG legislation, supporting the SEC's climate disclosure rule, and educating business and lawmakers on the negative impacts of legislation restricting the freedom to invest and operate responsibly. If you're coming from the main stage, we're here to take a deeper dive into the role of state attorneys general in blocking state and federal overreach on issues related to fiduciary duty. So with us today, we have this incredible panel. I'd like to give a warm welcome to New York Attorney General Letitia James, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, Arizona Attorney General Kris, California Attorney General Rob Bonta, and New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin. So thank you for all being here. Well, please take some time to introduce yourself and why you felt it was important to be here. You can start.
Sure. I'm Matt Platkin. I'm the Attorney General in New Jersey. As I said in the main stage, it really does blow me away that we actually have to have this conversation. I think it's so important that we stand up for what are really free market principles and people being able to invest. Climate change is affecting the economy. We know that if you don't, anybody who doesn't know that can come across the river. Tish, I'm not too far from New Jersey, as you know. You can see it from walk outside, go to the Ironbound in Newark, go to Atlantic City, which floods 10 times more than it did half a century ago. Come look at the damage we are still dealing with from Superstorm Sandy, where $30 billion of damage was caused to our state. If you don't think that affects insurance premiums, then you probably shouldn't be in the business. So we know this is real, we know it's happening, and we know you'd be, frankly, crazy to not take those effects into account when you're making a business decision. And that's why I think it's so important for us to stand up and make sure that the attacks from the other side are not unchecked.
Double click on that and just say that ESG factors, their consideration is good business. And a lot of this is wrapped up in politics, political rhetoric, political narrative. But if you just apply a big dose, a heavy dose of common sense to this conversation, you'll see that ESG factors are important to consider. And certainly when it comes to climate risk, again, billions of dollars last year in damage because of extreme weather events. Example after example tells you with common sense that these considerations are important if wildfires are harming your business infrastructure, if extreme heat are harming your workers, if drought is affecting your crop yield, if extreme weather is impacting your assets or interrupting your operations as a business. Those are all material business considerations that fiduciaries should consider. It's common sense, but we do have politics in our nation, and we're here to push for the common sense position and push back against the restrictions on the freedom to consider ESG factors. So grateful for the opportunity to be here with all of you.
Yeah, great. So Keith Ellison, good to meet everybody. Clearly, prosperity and environmental stewardship can work together, should work together, need to work together. I start from the idea of my role as a fiduciary on the State Board of Investment. I have a responsibility to make sure these pensioners are going to be able to retire with dignity. If the board is restricted from some investments or required to have others, then the people whose job it is to make sure that people can retire, just they can't do it. And it's expensive, and it's a big mistake. And really, it feels a lot like certain industries just trying to protect and feather their own nest at the expense of innovation. And I think that we've got to be on the alert for that and stand up against it and make sure that there is the freedom to invest.
Totally agree. So Kris, Attorney General, great state of Arizona, and I'm here because this supporting clean energy, supporting sustainability has been my life's work. I'm a little bit weird that way in terms of AGs. I think I'm the only AG who, prior to becoming AG, was a public utilities commissioner, not the traditional path to Attorney General for sure. But this has been my life's work, promoting energy efficiency, clean energy, renewable energy. I co-authored Arizona's renewable energy standard. I co-authored Arizona's energy efficiency standard. We got that through, believe it or not, an all-Republican Corporation Commission, Public Utilities Commission, back when Republicans could do some of those kinds of things. And back when renewable energy and clean energy were at a price premium. And we never imagined that it would only take 20 years or so, or even 15 years before renewables became competitive in price and became the least cost resource. And I never imagined in my wildest dreams when we were passing those standards and requiring the utilities to abide by them, that we would be in a situation in the year 2024 where not only were corporations like Walmart and Google, Apple and Toyota wanting to adopt more rules, but customers were also demanding it. But then all of a sudden, organizations like RAGA, the Republican Attorney General's Association, were writing threatening and nasty letters to those corporations telling them that they ought not do those quote-unquote woke things, which is insane. They are doing it because their customers want it, because it's the right thing to do, and because it's the right thing to do for their bottom line. So that is why I'm here, and I think why we all think this is so important.
That's great.
Kris, you're not weird. The other side is weird. You're prudent.
Thank
And
you.
so,
There you go.
ESG factors are good for business. It's just really about the bottom line. And climate change poses a risk to various aspects of our life. This year in 2024, New York has experienced 8 catastrophic events, 8, costing billions of dollars to the economy. And so ESG factors are really good for your bottom line. And we can't believe the misinformation, the disinformation that exists out there. All that we are asking is that ESG factors be considered with regards to your investment decision, and that you be informed. Because stakeholders and others want more disclosures. They want more investments in sustainable energy. They want to move away from fossil fuel dependence. And we would like for fund managers and other stakeholders to be free to consider ESG factors in their investment decision making. And that's really why I am here. And I'm also here because, as we all know, climate change disproportionately affects low-income communities and communities of color. And it's critically important that we also take that into consideration. I need to remind you of Superstorm Sandy, and Ida, and Irene, the names go on. And I know a number of individuals here in New York who died as a result of those hurricanes and those storms. And so I'm here in honor of them.
Thank you. I think one of the things that H.E. Mays mentioned, some of the letters from RAGA, and what have been the motivating factors for you all to join on with sign-on letters or litigation aimed at ensuring companies make reliable, transparent climate disclosures, and investors can invest in a way that considers ESG factors?
Look, we're not talking about charity here. I mean, most of you are not, I assume, running charities. You want to make investments in things that have long-term returns. And if you're going to sit here, as my colleagues have said, and I think as General James just pointed out really clearly, if you're going to sit here and talk about the long-term or even the short or medium-term economic realities, then you have to incorporate impact of climate change. You can pretend it doesn't exist all you want, but I live in a state that has 130 miles of coastline, which, by the way, to General James' point, includes our urban centers as well as our shore communities. And if you go to any of those communities and say to them the impact of climate change is not real, they will point to you realities today of how climate change is already changing their lives. Atlantic City had the highest foreclosure rate in the country after Superstorm Sandy. And again, I said it floods 10 times more than it did just 40 or 50 years ago. And every resident there will tell you about it. So the letters and the work that we're doing to push back is because, A, I do believe that people should have the ability to invest in what they think is in their economic best interest. And B, these are realities that we are dealing with, and this is yet another prong on a long-term attack. Several of us have filed lawsuits against a number of folks, including the oil and gas companies, for lying about climate change, and this is just the latest prong in that, to delay what this country needs to do, which is invest in things that will make us safer, and yes, also bring economic returns to the people that you serve.
Can I also answer that to the point of why the AGs are writing these letters? And I think it is to counter what the Republican Attorney General's Association is trying to do. And really, let's be clear what they're trying to do. What they are trying to do through these letters is bully your corporations, is to bully business, and to get you to waver and stop what you're doing in terms of the clean energy transition. This is, I know we use the words ESG a lot, but this is at bottom, this is about the transition. And this is a tactic, it's a scare tactic being used by several political organizations that are funded by elements of the oil industry, right? And that's what they're doing. So we are trying to push back and to say those same corporations, no, you, under the law, you have the lawful right, and in fact, you have a fiduciary duty to be responsible to your shareholders and invest in technologies that are least cost and that are the best for your corporation. And it's weird. As a former Republican, I find this weird that all of a sudden my former party doesn't believe in the ability of a corporation to control its own financial destiny, and that it believes that it has the right to intervene in a boardroom, in boardroom decisions. That's nuts. 15 years ago, that would never happen. That is nuts. It is. And so we need to call it out for what it is, which is, a couple of organizations gone completely awry, funded by tens of millions of dollars from basically the oil and gas industry. And so we're committed to pushing back on it and becoming the party of free enterprise.
Your party has walked away from a number of things.
Yeah, former
Your
party.
Former party.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on and on.
It does,
Yeah.
yes.
So all of the attorney generals here and others who are not here signed on to 2 letters. One in support of the Department of Labor's rule that would allow fiduciaries to invest in ESG factors, and then the SEC rule, which require more disclosures. Those are the 2 letters that we signed on to and support. And it's important that individuals understand that integrating ESG factors in your investment decisions is not a trend, is more than just a values-based decision. It's really about your bottom line. A number of states, all the states who are represented here and other states who are not, their regulatory framework, if you will, has changed. The landscape has changed considerably. And the states that are represented here and other states who are not here all have climate action plans where we basically are proposing to invest in, not invest in fossil fuels, to shift investment away from fossil fuels and invest in more renewable energies. It is, again, for the fact that, again, your clients and investors are urging more disclosure, support ESG factors, want informed decisions, because they recognize that climate change is real. They are experiencing it, they are seeing it, and it's good for your bottom line. And that's why all of us here, obviously, are in the forefront in supporting and protecting and safeguarding the ability for you to invest and consider ESG factors.
And I'll maybe just add this. It's not business as usual anymore. Climate change has an impact on your business, and that's just the truth. And we're pushing back because the Republicans are rewriting reality, trying to foist a false narrative on businesses and bully you into following it. And we can't stand for that. It's wrong. And it doesn't matter what the narrative is, the spin, the script that they're following, and they're good at narrative, spin, and script. It matters what it is. Just because you look at material, business, and financial considerations and call that woke investing, it doesn't mean that they're not material considerations that you should consider as a fiduciary. They are, and it's obvious. And we can't see with that and not act when some of the folks on the other side start saying up is down and black is white. We need to be anchored to facts and reality. And so that's why we combated this. And in California, we have our own climate disclosure rules and climate impact rules. We're proud of them. I've said out there, and I'll say it again, as California goes, so goes the nation. So perhaps at some point others in the nation will have those same rules adopted. We're trying to push the SEC and the Department of Labor to get closer to those. We think it's appropriate. And as the 5th largest economy in the world, with those rules in place and those laws in place, it makes a major impact.
You know, in Minnesota, I've always thought of myself as the people's lawyer. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you're being bullied and pushed around, I think it's the job of the Attorney General to be on your side and look out for your interests. And I mean, quite honestly, if a company is not treating a consumer right or some workers right, well, you're going to hear from us. But if some group of government officials are bullying a company, then we're going to stand up for you. And so it's important to understand, when what happened in Florida to Disney, I was so offended by that. I'm like, you telling me that these people who run this corporation, biggest employer in the state, want to cater to the needs of their customers and staff, and you're going to sort of take away public benefits that they've had in order to make them comply with your version of politics? I just found that to be a gut level offensive thing. And so I was real proud to be part of the letters. And quite honestly, what you should see from all of us being up here is that you have some people on your side if you feel that your company is not being treated with fairness, decency, and respect to make the decisions that you do get to make, right? Because all of us here, it's our job to make sure that consumer protection laws are being obeyed, environmental protection laws are being obeyed. So we do sometimes find ourselves across the table from corporate entities, but it's only because we're trying to uphold the law. And that goes for our colleagues on the other side of the aisle too. They have to obey the law too. They have to be fair, and we're going to uphold the right of companies to make the decisions that they really should make, because these decisions are going to determine the prosperity of your shareholders, of your employees, of your customer base. And so that's definitely one of my motivations. And the other one is I worry that if their bullying tactics work, it might dissuade you from doing things that are in the best interest of your company, which will inure to the disadvantage of everyone. And so we've got to make sure that you're free to make the calls that you're supposed to make. And so that's kind of where my motivation comes from.
Yeah, that's great. And moving towards the investment side of this fight. AG James, you lead New York's Investor Protection Bureau, one of the largest of its kind in the country. There's been pushback that we've discussed from state attorneys general and from some in Congress against asset managers who are trying to work ESG considerations into their decision-making and investments. Speaking to the investors in the audience, what is your response to those efforts, especially when it comes to material risks such as climate risk?
So all of us here have a duty and a responsibility to safeguard your freedom and your ability to invest in or consider ESG factors. And I'm sure all of you know, here in New York, we're not afraid to go against bullies. We sort of have a reputation here in the state of New York to stand up to individuals, obviously, who engage in misinformation and disinformation. Because as I've said, and I'm sure all of you have seen, no one really is above the law. Again, it's really important that individuals understand we police the marketplace. We have a responsibility to protect investors, to protect pensioners. It's really critically important that when individuals and companies engage in deception, misrepresentation, deceit, and/or fraud, that we take actions against them. We've taken actions against Monsanto. We've sued PepsiCo for their plastic pollution. And each and every time we will stand with these attorney generals, standing up for what is right, standing up for the facts and protecting all of you as you engage in prudent decision-making, as you consider the risk, the material risks of climate change, particularly in the face, again, here in the state of New York, the fact that we have faced eight events so far this year that have cost this economy billions and billions of dollars. And that obviously is going to impact your bottom line. And I can only speak for New York. There's nothing more dangerous than you standing between me and litigation. It's a dangerous place. Lem, who's head of my environmental bureau, he knows that well, and we work very close together to protect the environment, but most importantly, to protect New Yorkers.
That's wonderful.
And lastly, let me just say, I thank you for this forum. Education is key. Yeah. It's really key, and we have to do more and more of these, because I talked a lot about the attorney generals, and I talked about all of you in this room. It's individuals who are not in this room who will lead the way. Investors, pensioners, who obviously are concerned about our environment. They are the ones who will shift this narrative and shift the direction of your investments.
I couldn't agree more. AG Bonta, you talked a little bit about corporate climate disclosure earlier, and its importance as it relates to understanding and safeguarding California's funds. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? I know California has their own set of climate disclosure laws, but would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, when it comes to investing, we do a lot of it in California. We have some of the world's largest pension funds with CalSTRS and CalPERS. They want to make they want to make investments that are smart and that consider all of the material factors. And so things like climate risk disclosure, climate impact disclosure, those are elements that are part of the overall pot of facts that are considered when doing due diligence and making thoughtful investments that have real-world impacts. I mean, these are teachers and firefighters, people who've put in a hard shift at work, who deserve to have their pension protected, invested in well, and for it to be there when they need it. And so we believe that more is better, more information, more factors, more knowledge that is material to the investments that are being made helps make prudent investments, smart investments that yield and that support working people throughout California as they move into retirement and want to retire with dignity and respect.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And AG Platkin, we kind of discussed some of the letters that have been sent, but specifically you sent a letter as a group to Congress about fund managers' consideration of ESG factors. In that letter, it's mentioned that investors and companies need to consider long-term financial factors when making their decisions. Can you elaborate on how climate-related financial risks are an important factor when investing or making business decisions?
Yeah, I think we've touched on some of this. You know, as I said earlier, investors aren't operating charities, and they think long term. You know, when you buy a house, you think about what's the interest rate going to be on the mortgage? What are the taxes? Are you in a flood zone? Is insurance? How much is insurance going to cost? And you typically get a 30-year mortgage, and you think about over the cost of that life of that house before you make an investment. So everybody thinks this way. The crazy position is to not think this way. Like to say, oh, well, we want you by law to have to invest based on turning a blind eye to long-term or medium-term or frankly short-term risks. The numbers, you know, we're just across the river. Actually, Jersey's closer to where we are right now than Brooklyn.
Hey.
We get along great. Make no mistake about it. But you'd be crazy not to think about it. And just to the point of having it bothers me that we have to send these letters. Look, every one of us has broad authority in our office. I've indicted people. I've sued a lot of companies. I'm not afraid of doing it. But I've never once woken up in the morning and said, this company doesn't agree with my political views on climate or LGBTQ rights or DEI, or you name the hot button issue of the day. And so I'm going to sue them. And I know my lawsuit is to, excuse my French, BS. But I'm going to get people in my office using taxpayer-funded lawyers to send them a subpoena or to file a bogus claim. That's what we're talking about. And that's an abuse of official resources. And so when we file these letters, it is trying to push back on that.
Right.
Because we have to. And it really bothers me that you would have people in positions of authority with incredible privileges. To serve as the Attorney General, as we all do, is an awesome responsibility. You are representing millions of people, and you are given extraordinary power to make decisions that fundamentally affects businesses and people's lives. And sometimes people don't like it. And they don't like it because they did something wrong or we think they're in the wrong. But to use this power to punish people, to score political points for, as General Mays has said, to serve the interests of a small donor community. Because make no mistake about it, I'm the only one not elected up here, but I would venture to guess nobody votes based on an ESG position.
Nope.
You go out and talk to the people in the public, they don't know what ESG is. They know what climate change is because they're living through it. The reason why they're doing this is because it serves financial interests of people that back them and back organizations that back them. And we have an obligation to push back on that. And frankly, you should know, first of all, we've all been sued by them too, so we know what it's like. We will stand with you if you take that stance. Like, some of these fights have to happen. We cannot be so afraid of their offensive tactics that we end up doing exactly what they want. Because what they want is not lawful. I guarantee you most of what they're talking about is not going to stand up in court. It's purely a matter of bullying. And as General James has said, sometimes you got to stand up to a bully.
Yeah. Can I just say
Absolutely.
that their intent is obviously to chill all of us and all of you in this room. And what they argue is it's really all about returns. And I want all of you to know that what we are suggesting is, or urging all of you, is to integrate ESG factors into your decision making and to minimize risk and to maximize return. Not to the exclusion of all of the other factors that you consider, but that it should be a tool that you use given the reality of climate change. And so it's really about prudent decision making. And the data suggests that if in fact you consider ESG factors, that the return on your investment, you will reap rewards. And you have to look at the data that is out there because they would like for you to believe that your returns will be less, will be poorer. And I reject that because that's not what the data indicates. It will inure to your interests, and obviously it will benefit your bottom line. Sorry.
No, that's great. Attorney General Mays, let's kind of flip the script a little bit. You had talked a little bit about holding environmental polluters accountable in your state. Can you tell us a little bit about that work and how it really intertwines with the push to ensure companies disclose truthfully and reliable information about their ESG efforts.
Yeah, and I thought AG Platkin did a great job talking about the transparency issue and the need to fight greenwashing. But we have been aggressive. All of my colleagues have certainly done the same and done even more, given the amount of time they've been in office, and they've done amazing work on holding polluters accountable. I think all of us have sued companies, chemical companies for PFAS pollution, and we are doing that in Arizona. We are also being very aggressive in terms of looking at our nuisance laws as a way to attack polluters and doing what we can to deal with a situation in Arizona which which our northeastern states aren't dealing with, but we have allowed, or successive Republican administrations have allowed our rural areas to experience unlimited pumping of groundwater, including by the Saudis, who have come into Arizona and are growing alfalfa in Arizona, and using our water, an unlimited amount of it, and sending it back to Saudi Arabia to feed their cows, even though they've made it illegal in Saudi Arabia to do that. We have no offense, but I know you may be dealing with this, a Minnesota-based dairy that is pumping an unlimited amount of water in Arizona. They've plunked down 600 wells, and they're dewatering the wells of Arizonans around them. They pump more water than the city of Tucson does. So those are some of the kinds of issues that we are being pretty aggressive on, and will continue to do that. We are using nuisance law to protect Arizonans from unlicensed mines. But I think that's that's sort of the standard fare of AGs. I think that's something that all of us are doing, and transparency is certainly key to that.
That's great. AG Ellison, former member of Congress and former state legislator as well.
Sure.
So this Congress, the House of Representatives just passed several anti-ESG proposals. Some could potentially negatively impact proxy voting, shareholder rights, and pensioners. One of the things that we don't talk about often enough is how these pieces of federal legislation are going to impact folks in states. Could you tell us how these bills would impact the state of Minnesota, your residents, and more broadly, the nation?
Well, what they would try to do is restrict the considerations that the state of Minnesota can make on behalf of pensioners, on behalf of investors, on behalf of shareholders. They could try to route us into a certain set of investments and push us away from others in terms of renewable energy investments and things like that. They could limit our ability to, exercise decision making. We do use our proxy voting in the state of Minnesota's pension fund to express the desires of the State Board of Investment. That's a very important way for us to get our views out about the world. It's not only about environmental stuff. Sometimes it's about issues of executive pay. Sometimes it's about governance and the importance of having diverse governance structure and making sure that we account for risk properly. So it's trying to boss us around, right, in a way that I really don't have any business doing. I'll tell you this. It's these bills that they're moving forward, and hopefully they'll be killed off in the Senate and won't go anywhere. But it's also the process of moving these bills forward, because they'll drag us into their committee hearings, and we're going to have to now go testify and have some silly hearings, and they'll ask us for documents, and all of us have gotten these requests for documents and things like that. Again, taking up public time to deal with their very very partisan, donor-financed initiatives. And when I say that, what I mean is, people on the committee get donations from certain people and then serve their interests, not the public interests. And so it's a bad thing. I think we should go to these congressional hearings, and we should make our story clear, because I think you can use these as vehicles for public education. And so I haven't turned down any of these invitations, and I intend to keep them. At the same time, though, if they ever do get passed, you can bet we're going to sue to invalidate them. That's sure as anything. But I'll also add one more thing. It'd be great to hear from, at some point, not necessarily in this session, I'd love to hear your ideas about how we counteract some of this legislation that's moving through. Because depending upon what happens in November, I mean, there's more on the ballot than just a presidential election.
Yeah.
And we could all be very well dealing with these bills going to the White House for a signature. So we should all be thinking about how we counteract some of these bills.
Yeah.
And I just want to jump in on this, just an observation here that some of the folks behind the bills that you're mentioning in Congress, and this is unfortunately a partisan issue. I don't want to make it one, but it is one.
It is.
The folks on the other side are Republicans, and it is not lost on me that as they cry freedom, they are simultaneously stripping it away. They are stripping away reproductive freedom, freedom from gun safety, freedom to invest. And it is hard enough to be a successful business in the United States of America, to make investment decisions that have a return on investment. You always have imperfect information. You're always taking calculated risks. You should have a full line of sight on all the material information that is available to you. You should not be deprived of any of it. You should not be forced to run your business or make your investment decisions with an arm behind your back or a blind eye. And that's literally what they are, through law and through mandate, seeking to do.
Right.
And so it's weird.
Yeah, and if I could just pivot off of that, I mean, I come from a state, it's weird. So I come from a state that is 30% Democratic, 30% Republican, and 30% independent. 30, 30, 30. We are the quintessential swing state in Arizona, right? In fact, more independents than both Republicans and Democrats, I mean, at this point. But, I think maybe, and I love the protect the freedom to invest messaging. That is the right, I think that is the messaging. And Rob was talking about freedom in a way that I think really, really works, especially with independents and Republicans. And I think what's happening is we may have, or we were on the verge of losing this messaging battle by allowing them to declare that ESG is woke. Right? Or to declare that they're trying to prevent something bad from happening, when in fact, they are impeding on the freedom of corporate America to invest in clean energy technologies and sustainability in a way that redounds to the benefits of not only their shareholders, but also their customers. And at the risk of digressing, I want to give you an example of that. In Arizona, the Safeway stores are one of our big grocery stores owned by Albertsons, I think, decided to put outside their stores parking structures that are solarized. And at ASU, where I used to be a professor, we studied these parking structures and what, from a financial standpoint, they meant for Safeway stores. Well, guess what? On average, Safeway stores that had these parking structures with solar on them saw the customer spend on average 10 minutes more inside the stores. Why? It's hot in Phoenix. People love the fact that they had solarized these parking structures and that they had parking structures to park under. So that's a good decision. Now, these folks who are fighting ESG are going to call that woke, right? That's absurd. People love these parking structures, and Safeway has the right to install them wherever they want to. Also, they're offsetting their electricity costs of the grocery stores. So we need to flip the narrative. And really, and to this point about education that my colleagues are making, go out there and say, no, 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 no. This is not woke this, woke that. No, 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 no. This is about you and your choices and your liberty and your ability to get the best deal.
And may I just add, ESG is not mandatory.
Right.
You don't have to do it.
You don't have to.
We're not saying, it's not like they're saying you can't do it and we're saying you must do it. No, we're saying do what's in your company's best interest, and they're saying you have to do it our way. So I just think it's important to make that clear.
Can I just also say that not only the restriction on their freedom to invest, but all of the restrictions that Republicans would like to impose on Americans is reflected obviously in Project 2025. And that's their guiding policy book. That's their manifesto, if you will. And all their attempts, obviously, to reverse all the progress that we've made as a nation is reflected in that document. So if you need winter reading, I refer you to Project 2025.
So I know we've kind of touched on this, but as a last question, I'll open it up to all of you. But I saw one of my state policy colleagues back there in the corner, and I'd be crazy not to talk about the states. So across the nation, since 2022, almost 300 pieces of legislation have been introduced in 40 state houses to curtail the use of ESG investing. Some states in particular have banned their entities or agencies, such as pension funds, from utilizing the services of specific asset managers. These efforts are not only harmful to investors, but they negatively impact the state economy. So what are your thoughts about what investors can do to preserve their responsibility to consider material risks, and what companies face on climate, and to continue to push forward on their ESG work? Anyone can?
Just go ahead.
I was just going to say, look, there are clearly a few states that have actually passed legislation that restricts material risk consideration. I think Texas and Indiana come to mind, and the studies I've read indicate that there have been losses to the state and investors in the state because of these pieces of legislation. And so I think that, look, whatever's going on in Washington, the same thing is going on in every single state capital across the nation. So whatever we're talking about with regard to Congress, ditto your state house, only maybe worse because they can't get stuff through Congress, but they may well be able to get it through the state legislature. And so I'll just say we've got to be on the alert everywhere. One of the things we can do is we absolutely need to be in communication. The other thing we have to do is we absolutely need to take action to protect your freedom to invest at the state level as well. So I think that means litigation, that means organizing, that means a lot of things. But we should not sit back and stand for it because your pensioners can't take it. Your companies can't take it. The customers of your companies can't take it. And we've got to stand up for the freedom to invest.
I'm going to flip your question. I think there have been 300 bills that have been introduced that are anti-ESG, but I think there's more bills that are pro-ESG that have been introduced and more that have passed. So I'm going to think positive as opposed to negative. I'm also going to say that it's really critically important that fund managers have consistent rules and regulations, which is why I look to the federal government, which is why November is so critically important. And so from the Department of Labor to SEC, having these standards, consistent standards to guide you, obviously will assist you as you go forward to consider ESG considerations and integrate them, because there's a number of strategies. And as I mentioned earlier, we are not urging that you only consider the return on your investments, that you consider a wide range of strategies as you also take into consideration ESG factors. Again, it's really about your bottom line. And lastly, let me just end by saying Superstorm Sandy, Irene, and all the other storms and the 8 storms that we've experienced in just 1 year, 2024, in the great state of New York, costing billions of dollars to our economy and to businesses. Take that into consideration. And lastly, You have attorney generals, obviously, who will police the marketplace and ensure that businesses do not engage in greenwashing, deception, fraud, and we are prepared to stand up for the rule of law.
I think that was a great closing message there. But before we part, there are multiple people in the audience that I truly have to thank. First, to the NYU School of Law State Energy and Environmental Impact Center. And I'm going to specifically name Bethany Davis-Knoll and former Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch. You know, your sponsorship of this event really made this happen, and we couldn't appreciate it more. To our Ceres team, including our fearless leader, Mindy Luber, Stephen Rothstein, Randy Mail, and Sabrina Rabbins, who's in the back of the room, thank you for helping us pull this off. And I'd also like to kind of highlight two events that are coming up here. So Ceres is hosting our gala. If you're interested, you can visit ceres.org/gala. And then lastly, my colleague Randy Mail wanted me to highlight this, and I think it's very important. We're running a 7-week online course from the Michigan Ross School of Business for board directors and C-suite executives to gain essential climate and sustainability expertise to navigate real-world challenges facing today's rapidly changing boardrooms. It starts on February 3rd. You can visit ceres.org/course to enroll today. But thank you all for being here, and thank you to our Rockstar panel. Go ahead.
Just lastly, can I give a shout out to the security and all
Oh,
the
yes.
individuals at Jacob Javits who escorted us, made us safe. Thank you all. Thank you for the coffee. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Good job, Kris. Great job.
Well done.
Go, kiddo.
Thank you.
Way to do it, way to do it.